In Sandy Row tonight, and look forward to speaking to you and maybe having a discussion with you thereafter. I suppose if unionists are entitled to expect anything of their politicians, it is surely honesty. If you haven't got honesty, what have you got? So looking at things through the perspective of honesty, when Sir Geoffrey Donaldson told us just a few weeks ago that the Irish Sea border was gone and that our place within the United Kingdom had been restored on foot of his deal, then he not just stretched credibility to the limits. Frankly, he wasn't being honest with you. Because we now know that far from the Irish Sea border being gone, as Ron said, they're now spending £192 million to build border posts at a border that doesn't exist. A couple of weeks ago in the Assembly, I asked the Pink Wellies Minister how many staff his department had at the border posts. 152 at a border that doesn't exist. And he further said he hasn't got enough and he's presently recruiting another 28 at a border that doesn't exist. Sadly, the border does exist. It's a border that is partitioning this United Kingdom. Where do you have a border, ladies and gentlemen? And this cuts to the very constitutional heart of this issue. You have a border to demark, as a demarcation that you're moving from one sovereign territory into another. That you're moving from one customs regime into another. That's where you have a border. So you can rest assured, but by reason of the fact of the very existence of the Irish Sea border, it signifies and manifests the fact that when you leave Great Britain, you're leaving one sovereign territory to move to another. You're leaving British jurisdiction to enter EU jurisdiction. How can that be? Well, that is because under the iniquitous protocol, amongst the 287 laws that directly and irrevocably apply to Northern Ireland and Northern Ireland alone within the United Kingdom, one of those laws, probably the most constitutionally significant one, is the one that subjects Northern Ireland to the EU's customs code. What does that mean? Well, because the EU, as an entity of 27 countries, has no internal borders, that's the whole idea of it. It only has an external border. So it only checks goods at its external border coming into the EU. And subjecting us to the EU's customs code means that because Northern Ireland, under the protocol, is regarded as EU territory, the border that marks where you come into the EU is in the Irish Sea. Not where it should be, but in the Irish Sea. And you're moving under that customs code from GB, which the customs code operates on the basis that GB not being in the EU is foreign, is a third country, a foreign country, and therefore its goods coming into what is regarded as the EU, namely Northern Ireland, must be checked can be subject to tariffs, must have paperwork, and all that goes with a border. And that is why there is a border in the Irish Sea, because Northern Ireland has been subjected to the EU's customs code. And the EU's customs code says there must be a border at the entry point into the EU, and we are, under the protocol, that entry point. And none of that has changed. And that border cannot go so long as the EU's customs code applies to us. And not one of those 287 words, not one syllable of them, was removed by the tainted Donaldson deal. Not one syllable. And certainly nothing of the EU's customs code. So we are left with a border partitioning the United Kingdom and treating us as EU territory, with goods checked coming and going. This week I heard Gavin Robinson saying, well, don't worry about it because the red lane doesn't matter. Sorry, the red lane is the full-blooded version of the border. And why it matters is that it's not just about goods that are moving through Northern Ireland to the EU. It is also for all the raw materials that come from Great Britain to our manufacturing, to our processing industries in Northern Ireland. Every last one of them. If they are a raw material coming from Great Britain to be manufactured or processed in Northern Ireland, maybe never going to the Irish Republic, they all pass through the full-throated red lane. Yet Gavin Robinson this week told us we're not concerned about the red lane. Well, if you're not concerned about the red lane, then you're not concerned about the partitioning of your own country and the fact that you're being treated as foreign territory. And as for the green lane, or now called something magical like the UK internal market lane, something nonsensical, I can tell you it is still subject to and will still be subject to full documentary checks. Why? Because any goods moving from anywhere outside EU territory, therefore any goods moving from GB to Northern Ireland, is subject to the EU's customs code, and it requires declarations and checks. And whereas there is some leeway to diminish the physical checks, there is no leeway in EU law to diminish the documentary checks. And you're still going to be left with that. And what about the other laws? You see, what is it to be part of a nation? To be part of a nation is to be part of an entity that's governed by its own laws. We're no longer part of the nation of the United Kingdom in that sense, because we, in significant measure, are now governed not just by British laws, but also by foreign EU laws. Annex 2 of the protocol sets them all out. 287 and growing by the day. EU laws we didn't make, we can't change, which are outside the nonsense of the Stormont break, which are untouchable. EU laws that govern every facet of our goods economy, every facet of our agri-food economy, and much of our environmental laws. And here's the really constitutional significant point. They are the identical laws that govern the same things in the Irish Republic. Because the Irish Republic, being a member of the EU, is subject to those same laws. But we, supposedly being a member of the United Kingdom, supposedly having left the EU, are still subject to those same laws. And that is the constitutional obscenity of being governed by foreign laws. Many, many years ago, when I enrolled at the faculty up the road, the law faculty in Queen's, and I studied constitutional law, we studied many opaque and different things. And I remember learning about something that I thought I'd never live in. A constitutional condominium. I'm not referring now to a bunch of apartments with a swimming pool. Constitutional condominium is defined as this: a territory that is governed by two jurisdictions. A territory that is subject to the government of two centres. A territory like Northern Ireland now, that is governed in part by British law and in part by EU law. So we constitutionally now are not an integral part of the United Kingdom. We are a condominium ruled in part by the UK and by the EU. And it's for those reasons, of course, that we oppose the protocol. Because you can see, a child could see it, that is undermining, diminishing our position in the United Kingdom. And I have to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, the tainted Donaldson deal changed none of that. Not one word of the protocol has been removed by the Donaldson deal. And so I'm back to Ron's point. When he read you the declaration of unalterable position being rejection of the protocol. Why? Because to accept the protocol is to accept that we'll never again be a full part of the United Kingdom. Is to accept that we should be ruled by foreign laws. Is to accept there should be a border in the Irish Sea. And that, tragically, is what, alas, the DUP has now accepted. I hear talk about dividing unionism. Let me tell you who's divided unionism. Where was unionism united? It was united on that solemn declaration that I signed and I meant it. That Doug Beattie signed, Billy Hutchison signed, that Jeffrey Donaldson signed. My signature still stands because I still believe in that declaration. It is those who have departed from it. It is those who have given up unalterable opposition to the protocol who have divided unionism. That was the ground of unity. That was the ground upon which all unionists could unite. And it was those who sadly and tragically have disavowed that solemn declaration, who have divided unions. And in disavowing it, moved from opponents of the protocol to implementers of the protocol. To join in storming with IRA Sinn Féin, with the Alliance Party, with the Ulster Unionists, and now the DUP, to do what? To implement the protocol. Because you cannot be a minister in Northern Ireland without implementing the protocol. There was a case taken when Edwin Poots, remember him? When he was Agriculture Minister, before they did the right thing and resigned from the executive. He sought at one point to reduce the checks at the Irish Sea border. And an IRA front guy took him to the High Court. And the High Court ruled that by law, a minister must implement the protocol. So the moment DUP ministers took the pledge of office, they took a pledge to implement the law, which includes the protocol. And that is why they are now, sadly, not protocol opponents, but protocol implementers. And where do you think the notion and idea of Northern Ireland being subject economically, in our goods economy, in our agri-foods economy, being subject to precisely the same laws as the Irish Republic, as GB diverges from those laws, where do you think that has taken you? It's taken you through a stepping stone of an all-Ireland economy to ultimately achieve the long-term Republican goal of Irish unity. It's a very short step from economic unity to political unity. Anyone who knows anything about politics knows that the economics and the politics of a situation are totally and inextricably linked. You create an all-Ireland economically, and you're more than within touching distance of an all-Ireland unified. That's not where I want to go. I want the reunification of the United Kingdom, not the reunification of all Ireland. Yeah. So we're in a difficult and a serious position. And no unionist should think it's going to be okay. It is not. The parameters and the direction of travel now set by the protocol are inexorably moving us in one direction. And it's a direction of constant weakening of our links to GB and constant strengthening of our links to the Irish Republic. And the indisputable reality is this, ladies and gentlemen. For all their bombings, for all their sectarian murders, for all the genocide, the protocol achieved what the IRA failed to achieve. It pushed the border to the Irish Sea. For decades, we were subject to murderous terrorism by the IRA with what goal? To break the link with Britain, to push the border from where it should be to the Irish Sea. They couldn't do it. Along came the protocol and has done precisely that. So no one should trivialize or underestimate or downplay the significance of this iniquitous protocol. And no one should pretend to you that they've done away with it. I wish they had. Sadly, the Irish Sea border, EU law, EU jurisdiction, it all stands. And of course, it's because of that EU law and that customs code that our Supreme Court had to hold that Article 6 of our Acts of Union is in suspension. Why does that matter? What is our union, ladies and gentlemen? The Union of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is a political union and it's an economic union. The political union was created by Article 3 of the Acts of Union of 1800, which said one parliament for one people, one kingdom. And the economic union was created by Article 6 of the same Acts of Union, which said between and within all parts of this United Kingdom there shall be free passage and trade. And because the protocol fetters that trade, puts barriers in that trade, subjects to tariffs, to paperwork, to checks, puts a border in the Irish Sea, unsurprisingly, the Supreme Court had to hold that Article 6 of the Acts of Union is therefore in suspension. So you have an Act of Union created by two pillars, the political pillar and the economic pillar. And the highest court in our land tells us the economic pillar is in suspension. it's kicked away. It no longer is operative. And then some would be so foolish as to tell us there's no threat to the Union. Of course there is. And then what do? They crown it all by putting and enthroning a Sinn Féin First Minister. Today you might have heard a coroner's verdict.
Yes.
On a Mr. Doris and two of his IRA compatriots who on a murder mission in Coke met their just deserts. Said Mr. Doris, of course, is a close relative of your First Minister, who tells us with brazen audacity that there was no alternative to the murder of your kith and kin. No alternative means it was the right thing to do. It had to be done. You couldn't do anything else. There was no alternative. No alternative to Amon, incinerating 12 people at a dinner. No alternative to Enniskillen, brutally murdering those who stood to honour the dead. No alternative to T-Ban, men coming home from a day's work. No alternative to sectarian murder equally at King's Mills. No alternative to any of the vicious, vile bombs and murders that this city suffered. There was no alternative to it. It was the right thing to do. It was justified. That is still her position. This week in the Assembly, I asked her in her question time, how was it if her department was in charge of victims? Think of it. They're in charge of victims' boss. How was any victim of the IRA to have any confidence in someone who said there was no alternative but to make them a victim? She didn't answer the question, needless to say. But that is what, by the double-barreled folly of accepting the protocol and enthroning Sinn Féin, we've been brought to a position we have a stormont led by IRA Sinn Féin and all the time implementing the dismantling of the Union through the implementing of the protocol. And some of those doing it are so happy they're dancing Irish jigs. They're learning to play whatever it is, some of those Gaelic games. And then we're told not to worry. All was well. Oh no, you're told much more than that. Don't even bother thinking about it. Just vote for us all again. Don't ask any hard questions. Don't ask us where we stand in the protocol. Oh yes, we'll give you a soft answer, but all the time implementing it. That is why, ladies and gentlemen, when this general election comes, those of us who still stand where we've always stood, those of us who want the reunification of the United Kingdom, not the reunification of Ireland, those of us who refuse to accept the jackboot of either Sinn Féin law or EU law, those of us who say there should be no border in the Irish Sea, will have our say.
Yes.
That is the very essence of democracy. Have your say in an election. And if unionism is content with the Dublin Road, if it's content to live under EU and Sinn Féin rule, if it's content with the border in the Irish Sea, then I'd rather know it sooner rather than later. That's why it's important that in the coming months that chance is given to people to declare where they stand. The question to us all is, Which union do you want? Do you want the union of the United Kingdom? Or do you want the union of the EU? Do you want the equal citizenship of being a full and proper part of the United Kingdom? Or do you want to live in a situation where you're part British, part EU, and being shuffled out of your very own country? Because that is the inevitable consequence of the protocol. Make no mistake about it. The protocol is designed to deliver on all of Ireland. That is why its whole economic thrust is to build on all of Ireland economically as the stepping stone. And that is why, symbolically and practically, the Irish Sea border is so important to them. Because it forces business from its natural links by making them difficult to trade on a north-south basis, build the north-south economy, diminish the east-west economy. And slowly but surely, business like water will follow the easiest course, and the easiest course is going to be the unfettered trade, north and south, and so you will build an all-round economy. The difficult course will be the fettered trade with Great Britain, and so our position, our links, our dependency will diminish. That's the evil genius of this protocol. And no unionist, worthy of their name, should be lending their hand to implementing such a thing. Thank you very much.